Good evening, everybody, and welcome to an in-depth breakdown of tomorrow's long-awaited annular solar eclipse. So in this video breakdown, I'm going to be covering towns and states along the path of totality and providing times of when the eclipse starts, peaks, and ends. So the eclipse is going to begin very early across areas of Western Oregon. In Eugene, Oregon, you're going to be seeing your partial eclipse begin at 8:05 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. You're going to be seeing full Ring of Fire effect at 9:18 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and your partial eclipse is going to end at 10:39 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Looking at Medford, Oregon, you're going to be seeing a similar time frame to Eugene, with your partial eclipse beginning at 8:05 a.m., maximum at 9:18 a.m., and partial eclipse ends at 10:40 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time in Medford, Oregon. Moving down the path of totality into north central Nevada, your partial eclipse begins at 8:06 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. You're going to see the full Ring of Fire effect at 9:23 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and your partial eclipse is going to end at 10:48 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time in mostly rural areas of north central Nevada. Moving down the path into Utah, into southwestern and south central Utah, your partial eclipse begins at 9:09 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Your eclipse is going to peak at 10:28 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Your partial eclipse is going to end at 11:57 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Moving down through the Four Corners into Farmington, New Mexico, your eclipse is going to begin at 9:11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. You're going to see the full Ring of Fire effect at 10:34 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and your partial eclipse is going to end at 12:04 p.m. With a very similar time frame for Window Rock, Arizona, in far eastern New Mexico, or eastern Arizona on the New Mexico border. Moving down the path of totality into our first major city, Albuquerque, your partial eclipse begins at 9:13 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. You're going to see the Ring of Fire at 10:36 a.m., and your partial eclipse is going to end at 12:09 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And this is going to also include Santa Fe and Los Alamos, New Mexico as well. Moving down to Roswell, New Mexico, your partial eclipse begins at 9:15 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. You're going to see the full Ring of Fire effect at 10:41 a.m., and your partial eclipse is going to end at 12:15 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Moving down into Texas, Odessa, your partial eclipse is going to begin at 10:18 a.m. Central Daylight Time, with the full Ring of Fire effect at 11:45 a.m., and your partial eclipse is going to end at 1:21 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Moving down to San Angelo, very similar time frame, with partial eclipse at 10:20 a.m., full Ring of Fire at 11:48 a.m., and partial eclipse ending at 1:25 p.m. in San Angelo. Moving down into the largest city in the path of totality, San Antonio, Texas, your partial eclipse begins at 10:23 a.m. Central Daylight Time. You're going to see full totality, or full Ring of Fire totality, at 11:54 a.m. in San Antonio, and your partial eclipse is going to end at 1:33 p.m. Central Daylight Time in San Antonio. And moving down into the final towns in Texas to see the path of totality tomorrow, Corpus Christi, your partial eclipse begins at 10:26 a.m. You're going to see the Ring of Fire at 11:58 a.m., and your partial eclipse is going to end at 1:38 p.m. before the path of totality exits the United States into the Gulf of Mexico. So even though the path of totality is only going to cut through the southwestern and south central U.S., the entire United States is going to be able to see at least a partial solar eclipse tomorrow. So if you live in the northwest, the southwest, through the Rockies into the southern plains, you're going to see at least 70 to 90% solar coverage with tomorrow's eclipse. If you live across the northern plains, northern Rockies, central plains into the southeast, you're going to see about a 50 to 70% solar coverage. If you live across the Great Lakes through the Midwest into the Mid-Atlantic, you're going to see about 30 to 50% coverage, and unfortunately for my friends in the Northeast, you're going to mostly miss out with only 10 to 30% solar coverage from Washington, D.C. through Maine. Now, other countries included in the path of the eclipse, Mexico, in southwestern Mexico and the Baja Peninsula, you're going to see about 50 to 70% solar coverage, and in central and eastern Mexico, about 70 to 90% solar coverage, with the path of totality cutting through the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, into Costa Rica and Panama, through Colombia and north central Brazil. And if you live across the northern half of South America, you're going to see anywhere between 50 and 90% coverage, as well as if you live across much of the Caribbean in areas like Trinidad and Tobago, the ABC Islands, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, the Bahamas, Jamaica, into the Cayman Islands, you're going to see at least 50 to 90% coverage with tomorrow's solar eclipse. So looking at the cloud cover for tomorrow's solar eclipse with a GFS model, unfortunately, if you live across the Pacific Northwest, including Oregon and northern Nevada, you're going to be seeing mostly cloudy to cloudy skies. So unfortunately, the eclipse is going to be obscured from view if you live across Oregon and northern Nevada, as well as potentially across much of New Mexico into northwestern Texas as well. But if you live across much of southwestern Utah, northeast Arizona, northwest New Mexico, and especially Texas, you're going to be seeing near perfect viewing conditions for tomorrow's eclipse with clear skies. And looking at the North American model for tomorrow's eclipse, mostly overcast skies again across the northwest, including Oregon, but mostly clear skies across most of the Four Corners and Texas between 9 and 12 o'clock tomorrow. So if you live across from Oregon through Texas and in the United States, make sure you're preparing for tomorrow's annular solar eclipse. If you plan on looking directly at the sun, make sure you're wearing solar eclipse glasses. Thanks for watching this evening's breakdown of tomorrow's annular solar eclipse. Please stay safe and enjoy the eclipse, my friends.